Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an addict and so grateful to be here with you guys today. And I just love SOCA. You guys know you have my heart, you know. I'm not from Ontario, but sometimes they get the flyers wrong and say that I'm from Ontario. I don't correct them. Anywho, I'm Paige. I'm an addict. So grateful to be here with you guys today. And so I was tasked to talk about the 12 traditions, not all of them, just 1, 2, and 3. And man, if you guys are like me when I first got here, oh no, the traditions, I didn't even have a cell phone when I first got sober. So I didn't even have a thing to doom scroll on while people were nattering away like I'm going to do. Not that I was paying attention, I just disassociated and thought it did not apply to me. I thought that was for the keeners and the nerds, and some of y'all know I have become one of those nerds. But the truth of the matter is, the 12 traditions are the ties that bind us together. They are what allows our fellowship to stay free, to stay functional. It provides the life-giving blood of Cocaine Anonymous to the addict who still suffers. I'm referencing some of the stuff in the 12 and 12. I'm not that clever. I'll just share with you really quick what got me involved in the 12 traditions. Because it wasn't, and maybe for you guys, if you're here today and you're like, oh boy, the 12 traditions, I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear more. Glenn's doing 10, 11, and 12. Oh, we got Kim C. rocking and rolling, 7, 8, 9. Amazing. You know, you just can't wait. But what opened me up to the 12 traditions was not an interest, not a desire, not seeking spiritual growth. It was chaos and conflict. And I didn't know how to manage it. I was a member of a group, and I was the senior member, and there was drama and there was conflict, and I did not know how to handle it. And so what did I do? I had to dive into the 12 traditions, and I had to dive into these spiritual principles. And that's what these things are. Now, how I approach the 12 traditions, I do it in a number of ways. Now, the first is going to be relatable for everyone here, which is, what can the traditions do for me? What do I get from these bad boys? Like, what does it mean for me? It's all about me. Not familiar for you guys in SOCA. You are the most humble. I'm just saying that so you'll invite me back. I love you. But that's the first one. The second way I like to look at them is what is then, and some of you guys are going to be like, oh no, what is my responsibility to the tradition? You see, I am a recovered member, and now I have a responsibility to give to that tradition, to preserve that tradition, not police other people, but to embody that spiritual principle in and out of the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. And I also like to see how the 12 traditions apply outside of the rooms. I might not talk about that because you would think 15 to 20 minutes on each tradition would be plenty of time. But y'all invited me and I spent a full hour talking on tradition 8 one time. So we know I'll natter on. And then in the 12th tradition, it speaks about how anonymity is the foundation of all of these traditions. So I want to see, how does tradition 1 apply to anonymity? How does anonymity apply to tradition 1? See, anonymity, we're off on a tangent already. Anonymity is not us not knowing each other's last names. Anonymity is humility and selfless service. That's what we're talking about. So I'll try to talk about tradition 1, 2, 3 in through that lens or those lenses, and I'll probably forget some of those lenses and I'll get distracted and we'll go on tangents. So come with me if you want. And if you don't, that's cool too. Tradition 1, let's read it. Now I got my 12 and 12. I'm going to reference the 12 and 12 because I'm not cool enough to have like AA Comes of Age and like reference the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's for the history husbands. I just got the 12 and 12. All right, so tradition 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon CA unity. So what does tradition 1 mean for me? Because it's all about me, y'all. It's all about me. What do I get from this? What I get from the first tradition is I get rooms to come to. when I am new, when I am broken, when I am in pain, when I am suffering, when the lash of the illness of addiction is on me and I can't stay clean, or the spiritual malady is eating me alive and I don't want to be here anymore. I get to come to the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, and you are here and you are free and you have recovered. And they're not just are there meetings to go to, but there's a helpline to call. There's a website to visit. Do you know what I'm saying? You guys are here for me. Yay! It's what about me, right? And I talk about the traditions. I don't see the traditions as these independent pillars. I see these traditions as working together. And tradition 1 is one of those central, it is a load-bearing tradition. That doesn't mean we got to knock out tradition 7 and do some renos. But the first tradition, what it is carrying the weight of our survival as addicts who must find a spiritual awakening, or we will dive and plunge into the dark, joining those who have passed away from this illness. So tradition 1 unifies us. And when we talk about unity, it is also important to understand, what are we unified upon? Well, what we are unified upon is our 5th tradition. I'm not going to talk, that's for Jack. That's for Jack to talk about. It's real helpful you put the poster in the chat, because that's who I'm referencing. But we are unified upon our primary purpose, to carry this message to the addict who still suffers, to the addict who does not know that there is a way out. So tradition 1, what it means is that this fellowship gets to survive for me. Now, I'm probably not having kids, but I got a niece and a nephew, and if they ever need the fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous, that they can find it. And if their kids ever need Cocaine Anonymous, that they can find it. That is what the first tradition gives me, survival. And actually, in tradition 1, it speaks about Eddie Rickenbacker. And some of you are like, oh no, she's going on an Eddie Rickenbacker tangent. Yeah, I am. So Eddie Rickenbacker, he was a World War II fighter pilot. And his plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. And if you're wondering, all oceans are pretty big, but the Pacific's about as big as you can get. Not to be Pacific about that. I'm just kidding. I was making a specific joke. Paige, you're supposed to talk about tradition 1, not make puns about oceans. Focus. And so they crash landed. And the survivors of that crash were left in a little dinghy for 24 days. And survival, it really was life and death for them on that little dinghy, on that little life raft in the Pacific. And is that not what Cocaine Anonymous is? I am doomed to die of this illness, and I find this little life raft, that little home group that I go to, that online meeting. I find the life raft that is Cocaine Anonymous. And my very survival as an addict depends on our survival as Cocaine Anonymous. And in the 12 and 12, it talks about, man, they had limited water, they had limited food, they had limited resources, and they had to share, and they had to share evenly. Otherwise, they would all perish. The individual survival was based upon the common welfare of the group. And that is Cocaine Anonymous. Now, as a member who has found recovery, as a member who has found sobriety, as a member who has recovered as the result of the 12 steps, I now have a responsibility to the first tradition. Now, my responsibility to that first tradition is to preserve the unity of this fellowship. And how do I do that? Well, I do need to practice anonymity. Ooh, sneaking that one in. And again, anonymity means that what I want doesn't come first. Rude. What I want doesn't come first. No. The needs of the group come before my personal desires. That does not mean I need to disagree with everything that comes along in the business meeting. In fact, I often have a responsibility to speak what I feel is the truth. But if the group goes in a direction that is not my direction, can I still work with the group? Can I still work for the group? Can I disagree without being disagreeable? Can I focus on what I can give and let go of the results? And that unity, it is life and death. Now, I got a little bit of time. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time for when I gotta move to tradition 2 and when I gotta, you know what I mean? I gotta be on point, because otherwise I'll spend the whole time talking about tradition 1, and I've done talks on traditions where it's gone like that. So one of the things is these traditions do not simply exist in Cocaine Anonymous. See, these 12 traditions are spiritual principles. And they apply anywhere there is a group. A group is 2 or more people. Now, so here's the thing. Listen, this is just Paige trying to make the tradition sexy. You know, like, ooh, traditions after dark, you know. I wish I knew any more sexy things to say. But traditions, woo, and, ooh, getting hot in here. So practice the traditions. I am so sorry. This is, I'm never going to be invited back. But if you're in a relationship with another human being, the traditions apply. The unity of the relationship has to come first for the relationship to survive. If I am in a relationship with someone, and let's say it's romantic, just to make it intriguing. Ooh, who could it be? I'm just now trying to get some gossip, which is destructive to unity, but let's get some gossip going. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm in a relationship with someone, and I'm continuing to do actions and take actions or be inconsiderate that erodes the unity of the relationship will no longer exist. The basic principle of any relationship is that 2 or more is stronger than 1. And I need to consider the common welfare. And goodness gracious, I can consider the common welfare when we're in traffic. Even on the 401, if you're not highfalutin and taking the 407. You know I was going to make a 401, 407 joke. You know I was. Right? I can place the common welfare of others while I drive. I don't drive, but well, I'm a passenger. So it's easy for me. Or if you're taking transit, you know how you put the common welfare first, not blasting music that everyone has to listen to, right? I can place the common welfare first. Now it talks about, because there is that addict yearning, what about me, which is the hallmark of Paige's self-centeredness. Whenever I'm in what about me, we know I am in trouble. But it talks about how individual unity, and the welfare of the group comes first. That unity comes first, but very closely followed is the thought and concern of the individual member. Now, I'm going to lose you. I try to make it sexy. I really love old Grapevine articles because I'm fun. But in the 1940s, Bill Wilson was trying to sell the fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous on the traditions because traditions sound like rules and no thank you. And he wrote this article. And it's this article on Tradition 1. And it speaks so clearly about what Tradition 1 is all about. It says our whole AA program is securely founded on the principle of humility. He goes on to say, that is to say perspective, which implies, among other things, that we relate ourselves rightly to God and to our fellows, that we see ourselves as we really are, a small part of a great whole. And I need to preserve that great whole. But it is important for me to remember, even though I am a small part, I am still a part of that great whole. And that unity allows me to be a part of. So, not doing terrible for time. Ryan, look at me go. He's the one that gave me the format. I didn't know what the format was until like an hour ago. I didn't ask. That's nobody's fault. I really go by the seat of my pants. Let's talk about Tradition 2. And, There's in the 12 and 12, there's the long form and the short form. And just a fun fact, if you guys are going to participate in any sort of Cocaine Anonymous trivia, I got you. Maybe don't go against Cameron, because he's the archivist, so he's probably got like all the trivia. But I'll got you where I can, which is to say, the long form of tradition 2 is shorter than the short form. What? That's to say the short form is longer than the long form. Wild. That's how we do things, isn't it? All right, but let me just pop over tradition 2. I'll read the short form because it's the long one. So it says tradition 2. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. And so what does tradition 2 mean for me? I get to show up to Cocaine Anonymous, and it means y'all can't tell me what to do. There's no C.A. Grand Pumbaa. There's no Captain... I was going to say Captain Kangaroo, which is what would be if we had governors in 12 step. I don't get this. I did some service. I don't get my CA tiara for my service. Look at me. I don't know. I never in my life am I somebody who should do a pageant wave. I clearly don't pageant. But what that means is that there is no ultimate authority that is a human power that can boss me around and tell me what to do, which go have a look at your home group. Please do. Sit in your business meeting. Imagine any of these guys being in charge. Uh-oh. Now, we only really get into that when we think, but imagine me in charge. I would whip them right into shape, wouldn't I? Thank goodness. That's not the case. And what we experience in Cocaine Anonymous is a genuine democracy. That humility in action to speak of that anonymity, that I'm no better than anyone, that I am no worse than anyone, and that we are all equal in Cocaine Anonymous. And where am I dependent? Where am I reliant? And for me, it is God. And I use that word to describe the power through which I have accessed as the result of the 12 steps, but I'm talking about whatever power works for you. That power. And that, who's the boss? God. God's the boss. You know, we talk about group conscience. It's actually not group conscience that makes these decisions. It is and I'm going to emphasize this, loving God. A loving God. Now, we have this total right to a God, a higher power of our own understanding, and we're not given a whole lot of guidelines. In the second step, it's alluded to that power has got to be more powerful than my illness of addiction, more powerful than the obsession of the mind. But we have the freedom to come up with a conception to make that approach. But here is where we see guidance. And that guidance isn't just what we think we know best. In my experience, that guidance is rooted in our experience. That it is a loving God that works in our life, a loving God that flows through us. And we know that to be true because of the second tradition. Only a loving God wouldn't let one of us be in charge. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be a loving God that's like, we're not letting this silly little crackhead run the show, you know? So, what that means is that now, as a recovered member, I have a responsibility to that second tradition. And what is that responsibility? For me, it's a twofold responsibility. If who makes the decisions is in Cocaine Anonymous is a loving God, as that God is expressed through the group conscience, I have a responsibility to build a relationship with. And that's a view that I use. If you don't use that, that's cool. To build a relationship with, to access, to channel that power into that business meeting. I'm meant to bring God. I'm meant to channel God. Did you know that a business meeting can be a spiritual exercise? And some of you are like, yeah, if you've been to my last business meeting, you know it's a lot of heavy lifting. It's a lot of exercising. But that idea that a business meeting gets to be a place where I get to be an expression of God's love, does that not change how I show up? Does that not change how, when that guy makes that motion again, how I show up? And so I have a responsibility outside of the group inventory, outside of the group conscience, outside of the business meeting, to build and maintain that relationship with that power, ultimately to get me out of the way so that power can flow through me. I don't mean to step on Glenn's toes. I wouldn't, because he's lovely. He's just the sweetest. But that, when we talk about principles before personalities, I got some news. It is not putting principles ahead of your annoying personality, because I'm sitting here judging you. It is me putting spiritual principles in front of my annoying personality. Oh, rude. I gotta do that. Just the worst. Who invited me? I'll give you a list. It's a group conscious decision, actually, is what that was. We got a lot of expressions of God to take that up with. But what that also means, not only do I have the responsibility to be an expression of God in that group inventory, or that business meeting. My home group just had a group inventory, so I have that on the mind. But that business meeting. But I also have a responsibility to listen for the voice of God in that business meeting. And that voice of God might be expressed through that very difficult, very challenging, that person that's, I know you guys would never relate to somebody being argumentative in a business meeting. Oh, no, that would never happen. Just never happen. But what that means is I have the responsibility to listen for that expression of God. And oftentimes God may be expressed from that small voice that says, hey, I disagree with it. Or God may be expressed through that irritating, just grating voice that I can't stand but is speaking truth. And sometimes that the voice of God is easy in the majority, but sometimes it's in that quiet voice. And am I listening? Am I listening to hear the voice of God? Or am I just waiting? And I'm not calling anyone out. I'm talking about me. Or am I just waiting so I can show up and make my statement, make my opinion heard? But when I show up in that way, when I show up based on the principle of what can I give? How can I serve? Man, that radically changes this. And we're seeing how rooted in these 12 traditions is that humility, is that selfless service. It's not about me and what I can get. It is how can I serve this fellowship? How can I give? How can I be an expression of God? Now, I'm going to talk some more about our responsibility to the tradition, but before I do that, I want to make it sexy again. Woo! Woo! I'm so sorry. Tradition 2, hot stuff over here. So how can I apply the second tradition outside of Cocaine Anonymous, outside of the rooms? Well, let's have a look at our relationships, romantic, sponsee. Who needs to be at the center of my relationships? Who needs to be the one that is making the decisions in all of my relationships? I hope I can kind of see Nick and Amber, and it's like, wow, listen. Amber's like, I know who's got to be picking. I got it. No, it's God. It's God. Right? And all of my relationships go better when I show up to them truly as an equal, shoulder to shoulder. no better, no worse, and that we are listening for the voice of God and coming up with decisions together, working together, not me telling you what I think you should do, but listening to the voice of God through you. And I will let you know, some of you are going to be shocked by this, but I am not somebody that is always comfortable communicating. Not in this, I'm good with this, because I'm going to make jokes. But at business meetings, I am somebody who is a conflict-averse human being. Oh, there's conflict? No, thank you. I want to avoid it. I will pretend. Like there's times I'm just going to pretend it's not happening right in front of me. Like, I don't like conflict. And unfortunately, sometimes in service, there's personalities and there's conflict. I know, a shock, a surprise. Who would have guessed, right? And so sometimes my responsibility to the second tradition is to be honest when it's hard and to say the thing that I feel on my heart and I feel guided and led to say, but I'm worried that somebody's going to get mad or somebody's going to yell or they're not going to like me. And that is sometimes my responsibility to the second tradition. Now, I also want to talk about leadership. In tradition 2, it speaks about leadership. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. We do have leaders in Cocaine Anonymous. Make no bones about it. We have leaders, but the leaders do not take the role of dictator or governor. They take the role of servant. And in the 12 and 12, it talks about the bleeding deacon. And has anyone here ever moved, either switched home groups or worse than that, switched areas? And you get to this brand new area and you find out that they are doing everything wrong. And then obviously I've got to correct them on their ways of doing things that are obviously incorrect. Now we know that would never happen in SOCA. You guys always do it perfectly. Just buttering you up so you'll have me back. I'm just kidding. I love you guys. But it's that idea of when I show up as a bleeding deacon and that's defined and described as me trying to control and manage and fix and let me tell you how I think it needs to go. But who do I need to? And we all go through our bleeding deacon phases. Gosh, we do. We grow through it. But what we are all called to be is elder statesmen, elder statespeople, people who show up as true leaders. And it's described as somebody who is listening for that voice of God, that person who is sharing their experience, that person who is using their clean time or their sobriety as weight, but sharing their experience, true leadership. And you can see it and you can feel it when there is true leadership. You can see it when people were just butting heads or we don't know what to do, when we turn to that person who has demonstrated their experience and are able to take us back to that God-given path, back to that God-given direction. And what I'll read, I love this with tradition 2 because it gives me the grace to be imperfect, the grace to make mistakes. One of the things I'll talk about is only one of these traditions came easy to us. And I say us, we got them from AA. So they came easy to us, but they didn't come easy to AA. Yeah, you know what's up. They were hammered out on the anvils of experience. These principles came as the result of doing it wrong and making mistakes. So I really encourage, it's not that somebody is breaking the tradition, instead that they're maybe out of the bounds or out of the spirit of the tradition, and I can offer love and guidance. I don't need to wag my finger. And this is from a Bill Wilson Grapevine article, January 1948. And it says, sooner or later, every AA comes to depend upon a power greater than himself. He finds that the God of his understanding is not only a source of inner strength, but a source of positive direction. Realizing that some fraction of that infinite resource is now available, his life takes on an entirely different complexion. Now it goes on to say, as each day passes, our AA reviews his mistakes and vicissitudes. A vicissitude is a struggle. It's saying our evening review. We be doing that. Yeah, we do. I got a lot of blanks on. I'm like, we've been doing that evening review. I wasn't getting a lot of, yeah. It's pointing to that. The 10th step and the 11th step, the evening review. He learns. So as each day passes, our AA reviews his mistakes and vicissitudes. He learns from daily experience what his remaining character defects are, and becomes ever more willing that they be removed. In this fashion, he improves his conscious contact with God. We grow by making mistakes. We grow by then willing to turn to the power of inventory and turn to the power of God. And this is what I love. Every AA group, every CA group, same for this. Every AA group follows the same cycle of development. We believe that every AA group has a conscience, and that it is the collective conscience of its own membership. Daily experience informs and instructs this conscience. The group begins to recognize its own defects of character. A group having defects? Oh, goodness gracious. And one by one, these are removed or lessened. As this process continues, the group becomes better able to receive right direction in its own affairs. Trial and error produces group experience, and out of corrected experience comes custom. When a customary way of doing things is definitely proved best, then that custom forms into AA tradition. The greater power is then working through a clear group conscience. We humbly hope that our growing AA tradition, and therefore CA tradition, will prove to be the will of God for us. Man, doesn't that change how I show up to this thing, how I show up to service? Less judgmental, kinder, looking for God to be an expression. Man, that's incredible. And so let's talk about tradition 3. And by the way, I did that thing where I then closed the book. So tradition 3. So I got to grab it and open it again. So it says the only requirement for CA membership is a desire to stop using cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. So the only requirement for membership is the desire. Now, in the long form, as it's written in the 12 and 12, it does allude that, hey, I gotta have a problem with substances. But that is the only barrier to entry, is my desire. And so what that means when I come to Cocaine Anonymous is, y'all gotta put up with me. That's what the tradition means. You're stuck with me, you guys. Sucks to be you. Here I am, that I am welcomed. It does not matter the things that I've done. It does not matter my other troubles. It does not matter my difficulties. What matters is that if I have a problem with mind-altering substances, that I am welcome. And I am welcome to find a home here. And that has been my experience. That I was able to come and that I was welcomed. And you can see how these traditions work together. Because, man, if there is no group, I have nowhere to be welcomed to. And you can tell that if one of us was running the show, it would not be an attractive place to be. And so I come here and I am welcomed. I come here and I get to decide if I belong. There is nobody that makes that decision for me. I get to make it myself. And what happens? What happens is I begin to get well in these rooms. I begin to take the course of action that is the 12 steps. And I begin to awaken. I begin to have an experience and I find a home here. Now, I got a responsibility. I got a responsibility to those who are new, to those who have not found a home here. What is my responsibility to the third tradition? Man, my responsibility is not to police whether or not somebody is an addict. My responsibility is to give them the information of what it means to be an addict, the obsession of the mind, the allergy of the body, and to be an attractive, and I don't mean in a sexy way, I mean in a spiritual way, to be an attractive member of this thing. to help people feel welcomed, to help people find a home there. I cannot make somebody be a member, but I can fan the flames of desire. So if they have this, man, I might be willing, or I might, it does not matter. If it doesn't matter if they're still using it, doesn't matter if they're not doing it the way I think they should. It does, and believe me, I can get my little judgy pants on and I can think I have a way, but the second tradition tells me I got to let go of that. And my responsibility to the third tradition is that I need to offer that love, that compassion. I need to show up and create that welcoming environment. And for me, that welcoming environment, of course, is we're so glad you're here. Of course, keep coming back. Of course, it is that, like, doing our best to remember names, to reach out, to get their numbers. But it is also, for me, a responsibility to be a demonstration of these 12 steps, a demonstration of this power, a demonstration. So that when people come to Cocaine Anonymous, that they know that there is an answer here. That they know that there is a solution here. Why would I want to be a part of something that is not working? I have a responsibility to offer that demonstration of these steps, of this way of life. And when we talk about anonymity, as anonymity is the spiritual foundation of the third tradition, what that means is I got to let go of judgment. I got to let go of who I think will make it, how I think it should go. And I got to let God be God in the lives of others. And God be God in Cocaine Anonymous. That is my responsibility to the third tradition. And so we also talk about this idea that, like, you're a member if you say so. Now, in my experience, there is the bar for entry to Cocaine Anonymous, I'd say it's pretty low, but for us to get here, girl, it was expensive. You know what I'm saying? It cost a lot. That was actually a high bar that I was jumping. Well, it was probably a low bar that I was crawling under to get here. But there's that idea that, like, man, what is asked of me to be a member is simply the desire to be a member. But in my experience, what is asked of me to stay sober is a little bit more. In my experience, to stay sober, what do I have to do? I have to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. I have to dive into this work in this way of life. I have to show up and give to others and to be of service. But here's the thing. We don't have CA police. We don't. I know the archives, they have the little badges, which I think is so cool, but they're not the CA police. They're not. We don't have police. There is no one that will ask you to or force you to show up and be of service. But here's my experience. I take the course of action that is the 12 steps. And my life changed. My life changes in a way that I never imagined. I experience freedom in a way that I could never have imagined. Man, I experience a radical change, more than I could have ever received or imagined that I received. And I owe Cocaine Anonymous a debt. Now, like I said, we have no cops. We don't have spiritual debt collectors in the traditional sense. That's not what happens when they pass around the seventh tradition. No one's eyeing that. But what that spiritual debt collector looks like is the addict that comes into the rooms and is beaten and broken and needs help. What that spiritual debt collector looks like is a room that needs to get opened, whether it's online or in person, coffee that needs to get made, phones that need to get answered, H&I commitments that need to be fulfilled. You guys know what I'm saying? That is the spiritual debt collector. Nobody's gonna break anyone's kneecaps. Although I will say, when I'm in an in-person meeting, some of you guys are gonna get why this is funny. When I'm at an in-person meeting, I sometimes will say, Oh, the spiritual debt collector got me. That's what happened. I wasn't doing enough service. Got my kneecaps. And if you don't know why that's funny, I'm in a wheelchair. And there have been times I've made that joke, and there has been an audible, like a hush, and then a groan, like, oh no. That's how I make friends. But in tradition 3, it talks about, so it says this, the answer now seen in tradition 3 was simplicity itself. At last, experience taught us that to take away any alcoholics, any addicts, their full chance at recovery, their full chance at this way of life was sometimes to pronounce his death sentence, and often to condemn him to endless misery, who dared to be the judge, jury, and executioner of his own sick brother. What is asked of me is to lay aside my judgment, to lead with love, to lead with compassion, to lead with an open heart. That is what I am called to do. And we speak about this idea that, man, there are people that don't always show up in the way that I think they should show up, or do things in the way that I think they should. But if I can trust in a loving God, then I can trust that God is going to work in their lives, regardless of what it looks like to me. Because if you're like me, by the time I got here, man, I should not be in charge of anyone's life, because I shouldn't be in charge of mine. I got here, my life was unmanageable. I was managing it. I had to get fired from the management position of my life. Again, what my responsibility is to have the hand out to those who need it most. And then when we talk about the traditions, we talk at how do they apply to things in areas outside of Cocaine Anonymous. And I say we, I mean it's me. I've been talking for 41 minutes. I'm going to be landing the plane soon, you guys. Look at that. Doing good, following the instructions, doing what I was asked to. Go team. Some of you are like, oh, we are surprised. But in any relationship, the requirement for membership is a desire to be in that relationship and a willingness to make that relationship work. So what do I need to do? So if we're again trying to make the tradition sexy, woo! So if I am in a relationship with somebody, I'm not, but if we want to make up a story that I am, so we get to talking about the traditions, I'm here for it. Again, gossip is detrimental to unity, but who cares? We're talking about me, it's fine. We can gossip about, what's going on with Paige? Nothing, I'm just talking about the traditions, woo! But any relationship, what it requires is all parties. And when I say relationship, I do mean, we have the relationship at our home group. We have the relationship with the people that we work with. We have the relationship with our whole family. So what is the requirement for membership? That desire to be in that relationship. But I also need to be willing to make that relationship work. And that requires self-sacrifice, it requires humility, and it requires service. And you see, when I look at these spiritual principles, and that's what they are, like I hope that we're getting away from these as rules or laws, but instead spiritual expressions of humility, spiritual expressions of anonymity, spiritual expressions of God's love for us. That changes how I orientate myself to them. It changes how I show up to life. I get to see them in a whole new way. And can we imagine what life would be like if I showed up to life with the third tradition in mind, trying to create a safe, a welcoming, a supportive environment wherever I go. Whether I'm at work, whether I'm in traffic, whether I'm, on the bus, whether I'm, with my family. To be fair, family's probably where that's trickiest. You know what I mean? Ooh, they know the buttons to push. They installed them. You know what I'm saying? Like, right? But if I show up in that way, creating that safety, creating that environment where somebody wants to be a part of it, where they want to belong, where I'm creating that sense of belonging. Man, wouldn't, and I'm not even going to say the world. I mean, I do think it would be, but wouldn't my world be a nicer place? Wouldn't the world that I live in be a nicer place if I showed up and simply practiced? It's a practice. We're going to make mistakes as we're reading in tradition too. We're going to have human moments where we catch ourselves judging. We're going to do it wrong. But if I continue to lean in and practice the 12 steps and practice the principles of these traditions, isn't it incredible how my world could change? So hopefully I made that sexy. I'm so sorry. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you for asking me to share.